So, you chose to go with the shell jacket versus the more versatile sack coat. That's okay. So let's make sure this week on the 11th OVC, we talk about what to look for with the mounted service jacket. So this stylish jacket can be referred to as a mounted service jacket, or the MSA, and is also referred to as a shell jacket. The shell jacket is a garment that reaches down basically to the hip level. It was common in the mid-19th century. The jacket first became popular in Austria and was first introduced into the European armies toward the end of the late 18th century. The term shell jacket actually originated from Britain when the Light Dragoons adopted the short blue over jacket or shell jacket. Though the jacket was short-lived for that army, the name stuck, a shell jacket, and of course was adopted by the United States and other armies later on. So specifically for the U.S. Army, the shell jacket became regulation for the U.S. Army in 1833, replacing the Napoleonic-era blue tailcoat. The early dragoon or cavalry uniforms were navy blue with orange, later yellow, piping, and artillery uniforms were identical but of course had the red piping on them. Now they had a brass rather than a silver button. An infantry version of the shell jacket was worn during the Mexican War as late as until 1851, when it was replaced by the dark blue frock coat with sky blue piping. Of course, the infantry still adopted the shell jacket on and off, but this is talking about the major adoption, the major use of the shell jacket. But of course later, the cavalry kept using them because it, being at hip level, a little bit more easy and a little bit more designed for those on horseback. For those of you who watch our episodes that we put on about uniforms, equipment, stuff like that, you'll notice that in previous uniform episodes we were able to give detailed information about contractors, contractor names, numbers, all those who produce the garments of the uniforms that we cover from episode to episode. However, I will say that I was unable to find specific contracts or orders for this specific garment, probably because I don't know personally exactly where to look. But, however, while I don't have many of the details I wish I had that makes this episode what it should be, what makes this episode unique is that we as 11th Ohio Volunteer Cavalry have access to an original mounted shell jacket used by a member of the 4th Michigan Cavalry. So let's actually take advantage of being able to handle and look at an original and compare our original to our reproductions. Here you can see the three different types of jackets that we'll talk about today. The one on the left is a mainstream jacket. The one in the center is a quality jacket built by Nick Sakala. And the one on the right is an original jacket, again, worn by a member of the 4th Michigan Cavalry. One thing you can notice is the difference in the construction, color, and trim of these three jackets. Also, as we talked about in our sack coat episode, you can start to see some purple color coming out of the mainstream shell jacket to the left. Also, take note of the yellow piping or trim on the three jackets. While you may not have trained your eye to see the difference in piping yet, it becomes pretty obvious when you actually take a look at wet plate photos taken of these three jackets. So first, as we always should do, let's start looking at the original shell jacket. And in most, not all, but in most cases, the piping used on the original shell jackets were made out of a non-reflective piping that does not show up on most of the wet plate or tin type photographs that were taken at the time. As you can see in these original photographs, the yellow piping generally does not show up. As we move to modern wet plates, you can see here in this picture of us at the 150th BGA Gettysburg that the piping on the shell jacket in the far left individual shows up as reflective, while the piping on the other two do not show up, similar to the originals. Also, notice another common characteristic in jackets of the time, which is the personalization of the owner's name on the inside of this jacket. As we also discussed in our sack coat video, adding small details like your personalized name increases your authenticity and makes your jacket a little bit more unique, more authentic, and of course, more yours. Additionally, notice the standard left breast pocket, but also notice the personalized pocket on the right side. Pocket modifications like this seem to be one of the most common modifications soldiers did to their uniforms. The lining in this original is a bit different than the high quality reproduction we have made by our previously mentioned vendor, as the original lining is made with a very lightweight muslin type lining, while the high quality repro is made with a nice flannel. Also, this original has a sewn-in hanging strap. While this probably is a product of post-war storage or use, it is at least worth noting that this hanging strap is sewn in toward the top there. Also, next, let's look at the buttons. You will notice that there are some non-issue buttons sewn back on. While it is impossible to say whether these buttons were sewn on during the war or post-war, again, either way, it is worth noting. And something that might add to your impression would be to replace some popped out buttons that you need to sew back on with standard or non-standard buttons. But again, something to keep in mind, it definitely wasn't NUG, wasn't the standard, but something again worth noting to make your uniform maybe a little bit more personalized and possibly even a bit more authentic. Another thing that is extremely important to look at when choosing a correct reproduction for your shell jacket is the construction of the pillows in the back. Now, if you're like me, when I first got into cavalry reenacting and saw these weird protrusions out of the back of the coat, I have no idea what they were. What they are for is to hold your saber belt high on your belly where it belongs. If you allow your saber belt to ride below these pillows right here, then that will take away from your impression. It will take away from how you look, make you look really sloppy, and actually will make you look a little bit more modern. Again, won't make you look as a soldier in the 1860s, it'll make you look like a reenactor, which is not what we're going for. So specifically for these pillows right here, the construction is just that, of a pillow. Notice how they are not spiraled, they are not sewn on in reverse order, they are just that, pillows sewn on in the back, filled with product to, I guess, protrude out of the back and keep that saber belt high where it belongs, above your belly. So let's actually apply this to our reenacting hobby. If you choose to wear a shell jacket or a mounted service jacket in a reenactment, please try to be conscious of what event you are going to and whether a shell jacket or, again, a mounted service jacket would have been appropriate for that time and for that impression. Unfortunately, that is not an easy task to ask necessarily, as it requires a decent level of research and interpretation, but it is something that we need to look at. Again, these type of shell jackets are definitely okay early war, but as the war goes on, looking at some of the photos in the Library of Congress, the later the war goes on, the less common you see these mounted service jackets in those photographs. But once you choose that a mounted service jacket is appropriate and you begin looking for a good quality one, the first thing to look at is the fabric and dye of the base material that it's made out of. It should be finely woven material, not like a fuzzy wool or anything like that, not like a blanket type wool. Again, if you're looking at the original the jackets right here, you can see how tight and fine the wool was woven. Secondly, the color is most important. As we discussed in our sack coat episode, it needs to be more of that I guess, rich blue, not that dark blue that fades to purple. Again, as you can see between the mainstream jacket, the quality reproduction here, and the original, the mainstream jacket over there is composed of more of a dark navy blue that actually you can kind of see a little bit that it's already kind of faded to purple a little bit. While this one has had, five seasons of reenacting, a lot of UV damage, a lot of stuff going on here, and it looks relatively good. And you got this original here, some fading, but definitely not fading to purple. Next, make sure the cut and construction is right, specifically the sleeves and armholes. You can see that between the original jacket to the quality reproduction to the mainstream jacket, there are minor differences in construction that result in it sitting different on your body. The best way to know how your jacket should fit is to look at as many original photographs as possible and see how those guys wear those jackets, and then make sure your jacket fits like that. Unfortunately, as I do know, this is only after the fact, after you purchase it, but there should be a fair amount of pictures at that reproduction, or the organization that you are buying your reproduction from should be able to send you photographs of ones they've made with people in them, wearing them, and using them. So in going over those few details already, you may say that oh come on Steve, these details don't really matter. How nitpicky can I get going over all these details? I mean, come on, no one really notices all these tiny details. Why spend so much time and effort in all these little details if no one's ever going to notice it? Well, the problem is that people do notice. They don't know it, but they do notice. You may not know it, but you do notice. The problem is that we want to be seen as soldiers from 150 years ago who just stepped back in time, or who just stepped forward in time, I guess, if you want to say that. We don't want to look like reenactors. Again, we want to look like soldiers, not reenactors. And every little mistake or every little inauthenticity that we have in our uniform adds to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mistakes that we have in our impression and how we carry ourselves, in our gear, in our clothing, and all those add up to a conglomeration of either being inauthentic or being authentic. Obviously, we cannot be the most authentic as possible because we don't have the time period, we don't have the equipment, we don't have exactly the situation they had back then. But my point is this: every small detail that you miss is one notch further into looking like a farb or looking like a reenactor versus looking like an original soldier. So yes, while the pillows on the back, how the buttons are sewn on, having your name stamped on the inside of your jacket, those are all details that help you carry yourself to a more authentic presence. While people may not look at it, may not be able to point to it, they'll be able to look at you and say, he looks the part, versus looking at someone else that says, well, obviously he's a reenactor. So with that, those are some notes to keep in mind. So that's the basics of the Mounted Service Jacket, or the MSJ, or the shell jacket. I hope this video was valuable for you guys. I hope you took away at least one piece of information that you think is useful or valuable. That is it for our episode today. Thank you so much for watching. We appreciate it if you would subscribe here on YouTube. Please like us on Facebook. Please follow us. And we look forward to seeing you on the field. Thanks again for watching the 11th OVC.